I love helping people. I love connecting with people. I love providing hope, um, because I think that's number one.
Welcome to Tearing Up My Heart, Emotional Leadership Lessons, the podcast where we explore the connection between emotions and leadership. In each episode, we will dive into a specific core emotion in an unrehearsed interview of selective high-level leaders. Join me, Jenna Heath, as we navigate the roller coaster of emotions that come with leadership and discover valuable insights that will empower you to become a more emotionally aware and impactful leader. From personal anecdotes to expert interviews, this podcast is your guide to mastering the delicate dance between the heart and the mind. Get ready to tear up old notions and pave the way for a new era of compassionate and effective leadership. Let the journey begin. Okay, hello, howdy, welcome back everyone to Tearing Up My Heart podcast. I'm bringing out my Texas roots today with one of my I can't even really call you a friend, your family, someone that has truly known me since I was probably about 12 years old and has been like a second dad to me throughout my life, and someone that I honor and respect so much. So in my house, you're Papa Nail. That's your name in my house. That's what my husband and I call you. But for today's episode, I guess we'll be calling you by your given name, Larry, which doesn't sound as fun as Papa Nail to me. But thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I love you and love to be here with you.
Well, I am honestly just so excited. As I was reviewing your bio today and preparing for this podcast, I was just reflecting on the man you are, the leader you are, and the incredible career that you've had. And I'm so excited for you to be able to share some of your wisdom with my podcast listeners, because I think that you'll have such a different perspective than so many of our previous podcast guests. So Larry with us, the principal and managing partner of LCN Executive Healthcare Group. You started your career with, in your words, solid American companies like Procter Gamble, Baxter, and then you began taking risks, which I'm very excited to talk about risks, with smaller companies until you finally started your own company and you do merger acquisitions for healthcare companies with private equity, which sounds very unique. And it sounds fascinating to me, but I'm actually more excited about what I'm considering your second career or your retirement career, which is essentially doing ministry work in Uganda. You recently authored a book. I'm probably going to butcher this, but Mzungu Visits Africa. And I'm excited to hear about that too, because I think that I'm sure you would say this as well. Like, leadership is in all areas of life. And when one door closes, another opens. And as you've built this incredibly fruitful career and everything you've learned there, and now being able to take that experience into ministry and do work that I know you love and care about so much. So thank you for just sharing who you are and sharing some of your journey. So while we dive in, do you want to just share a little bit about your leadership background? How did you get to where you're at today, especially kind of brainstorming into ministry work? How did this all happen?
Well, that's a lot, especially for somebody as young as me. That's a lot. I'm teasing. Just gosh, from the very beginning, I was raised in a wonderful home, great parents, kind of prepared me, and I had always wanted to go into sales, but I wanted to go into medical sales, and you didn't really do that when you got right out of college. You had to go with another company, and then work your way to that point. So, I took a risk on that too, my very first one. So, at the time, I was going to the University of Memphis, and there were no jobs in Memphis for me, which was shocking because I lived there. My wife had lived there, and we thought we'd be there forever. And wasn't the case. So we had to shift it a little. And so I thought, well, let's look Procter Gamble. That'd be a great company. So I pick up the phone and I call the local office and I said, yes, my name is Larry Nail. I just wondered, do you guys have any openings? And she said, yeah, hold on just for a second. Let me let you speak to the manager. And I'm like, no, I just wanted to find out and send my resume. So this gentleman got on the phone, nice as he could be. So we have no openings, but if you want to send your resume, go ahead. So I did at the last minute. I said, I'll just send it. We'll see. Well, 2 weeks later, they had an opening in Louisiana. And so I'm like, well, don't necessarily want to go to Louisiana, but I'd do it for P&G. And so I had 4 or 5 interviews. And at the time, I was working full time. I was working 40 hours a week at the hospital. and going to school taking 12 hours. So I was like from 8 in the morning till about midnight. So it was a lot going on. So I think what really got me the job was at the very end. The manager, Gary Miller, said, Larry, this is a tough job. P&G is quite a company. You think you could handle the hours? And I said, well, currently I'm in school from 8 to 12 and I work from 3 to 11. So as long as it's not a lot before or after those hours, I think I got it. And he laughed. He said, you got the job. So anyway, we moved to Louisiana with my wife crying in the car crossing the Atchafalaya Basin. And where in the world are you taking me to? So anyway, that was the beginning of my career. I worked for other big companies in management, Baxter Healthcare, and some other smaller companies too. And then decided to really take a plunge into something that I knew I could do. But for a couple of years, there was no money coming in. So I had to learn just to trust. And it's the best decision I've made outside of my marriage, my children, and my work in Uganda. So love what I do and love meeting people and creating great relationships.
I feel like I couldn't describe you better in a nutshell as someone that loves meeting people and creating great relationships, because I've certainly seen you do that time and time again throughout my life. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about how did that kind of career and that life pivoted into Africa and Uganda? And I feel like that's something that people legitimately write books about, just like trading it all in to go do mission work. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So if you had told me I'd be doing what I'm doing now at 62, I would have said you're absolutely nuts. I have no desire to go to Africa. I have no desire to go to Uganda. That's not going to happen. So here's an interesting quote, and I heard this the other day, and it really is perfect, is you don't find your mission finds you. And this mission found me. Over 20 years ago, when my daughter Maggie and Emily, two daughters, were very little, very young, we were in San Antonio where Jenna lived, and we went to this event with this African choir singing, and they had little pictures of the kids where you could sponsor. And so since I lived in an estrogen palace, I had a girl wife, daughters, and two girl dogs. We said, let's pick this little boy, Dimby. So we picked him out. He wrote little color pages to us. We wrote him notes and all that. And then he got to be an early teen, and he found me on Facebook. So it was a different level of communication. And then probably about 3 or 4 years later, there's a thing called WhatsApp that's international. It's kind of like Facebook, or like FaceTime. And so he started calling me. We started chatting, and he's like, Dad, when are you coming? And I'm like, where? And he goes, to Uganda. And I'm thinking, no plans. But I didn't say that. I said, I don't know. So anyway, a good friend of mine who you also know, Greg Lewis, Greg was doing mission work, encouraging other missionaries. He said, just go with me, Larry. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. And so, and I'm just being really honest for people that like saying, no way, I'd never do that. So I live in Houston, so I get to the airport outside, and I'm like, what can make this different? And I just sensed, and I know it was the Lord, but I sensed it, that when you go and you meet people, you make sure that you give them your name and your phone number, key people, so you'll make contact with them. And so that's what I did. And from there, the story goes on. But part of that is very interesting too, because previously I'd gone on these quote mission trips, and I'd be the one 6 months later to be waiting in the line of the hotel to get my room and say, I don't want 2 twin beds. I want a king bed. And I said, I don't want this to happen on this trip when I get back. And I guess the Lord really heard me say that and said, okay, it's going to happen that way. And it has totally changed my life for the better.
Wow. That's really inspiring and encouraging, because I think your daughter, Maggie, and I, for reference for listeners, Maggie is one of my best friends and a big podcast fan. She is by far probably my number one fan. But I remember her and I took a mission trip together in Mexico when we've had to have been still in middle school, maybe early high school. And I remember feeling that way, coming back and being like, wow, like people actually live very differently than the privilege that we encountered, especially growing up. And it really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I think that holds true so much to the person I am today, the leadership I have, and how I choose to lead people, and reminding myself that not everyone has the same privileges and rights simply because of where we're born, which is horrific, but true. So I'm excited for us to dive a little bit more into that story as we go today. But so I'm thrilled about your emotion today, because I think that leadership requires like utmost positivity all the time, even when things are falling apart. And I think hope is a huge part of that, that it is easy to remain optimistic and happy. And even maybe if you're still feeling a little bit challenged, to truly believe that there is good because you have hope. So hopefulness, we're going to define as the optimistic state of mind characterized by the belief that positive outcomes are possible, even in challenging or uncertain circumstances. It involves anticipation, confidence, and a willingness to persevere despite obstacles. And I really liked this particular definition because when you chose the word hopefulness, I truly I thought about, I was raised pretty much around you all. I truly believe that you and Mama Nail were my second parents, and you walked me through some very challenging times when I was in middle school and high school, and continued to be a huge part of my life. You married my husband and I, you did premarital counseling with us. Like, you were a huge part of my life, and you still are. But one of the words I would really characterize your entire family, really, I would say, is hope. Is that you all lead such a life of knowing that there's more, there's hope, you can make it through any challenge because there is something better. And I really always hung on to that. And it's something I really admired about you all. So I'm excited to kind of take a different spin on that, because obviously when I was growing up, I saw you use hope in your family, how you led your family, how you raised your daughters. I would even argue how you somewhat raised me sometimes. I remember the first time I showed up to your house with a tattoo and I thought your face was going to fall off, which is hilarious because one of your son-in-laws is smothered in tattoos now.
Now I got one too on my foot. So.
It's amazing how things change.
Yes.
But I really am excited for you to share about what hope looks like as a leader and in the workplace, because I would like to think those are probably similar, but I'm more interested in your expert opinion on this. So let's just start easy. Let's start simple. How do you think leaders can cultivate a sense of hopefulness?
Well, I think they have to be open-minded. Not every opportunity is the best, and not every opportunity is the worst. Not everything goes according to plan, and not everything goes not according to plan. You have to be able to pivot and realize that if this ends, if this is not right, it's not the end of the world. I'll learn, not to say I want this, but I'll learn way more when I have failed than I do when I have done well. A lot of times I'll look back at the deals that I've completed and post-mortem and say, well, man, I wish I'd done this a little differently. I wish I'd done that a little differently. But without hope, you really don't have any life. And I know it talks about in scripture that, all things work together for good. So if you believe that you really believe it, then anything that happens is happening for a reason. And the only thing that I can control is me, my actions, my attitude. I can't control anybody else. And that's a joke if I think I can. So, but hope gives me the idea that this will work together for good, no matter what happens. If I don't get this big deal I've been working on for 2 years, there's got to be a reason. And maybe I'll find out, maybe I won't. So, if you live with the end in mind, there's so many things here that are just, we forget 6 months later, even the really tough things. Maybe it's a year or two, or maybe it's even 6 months. We forget about it. It was a big deal then, but it's not now. So life moves on with or without you. And, the things that you're going through, I guarantee you there are people that are going through much, much harder things. That doesn't mean to minimize what you're going through, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, Absolutely. Something I teach my students a lot is the five rule. So the rule of five, I guess other people call it, but right, is this going to matter in 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years? And depending on how you answer that question should depend on what level of emotion you invest in this particular issue. And I think one of the things I often ask myself when faced with leadership challenges is like, is there hope for a solution in this, right? Because some things, like you said, we can't control other people, we can't control their actions. We can try our best to maybe mitigate and like help walk them through challenges, but at the end of the day, we lead people. They're going to do what they want to do. And so I always ask myself, is there hope for a solution in this, or is it purposeless? Like, is this even really worth my time? So what do you think about that? Do you think there's always hope for a solution with leadership challenges, or do you think some things really are worth walking away?
I think that's a ton of wisdom you just laid on me, and I think maybe I should be the one interviewing you. Seriously.
Thank you.
That's true. I think that's true. I think that you should always have hope if you believe something is going to happen. But if there's a turn in the road, you don't give up. But if you want to continue to push into that hope and you believe it's going to happen, and if it happens, wonderful. But if it doesn't, you can learn lessons either way. We talked about that. So if it doesn't happen, what lessons did I learn? I remember a deal that I wanted to do and it didn't work out, and I was sick about it. 3 months later, the guy that I was talking to was arrested and put in jail, a doctor. So I'm like, I was so upset I didn't get this deal. I would have looked like a fool had I got that deal, So anyway, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Something my husband and I always say is that like we don't know the plan, right? And so whenever things go awry or something that we might not have like planned for or wanted, is we always remind ourselves like we don't make the plan, we don't know the plan. Like it's our job just to be diligent and obedient. And I think I actually probably in a weird way learned that from you. Most likely, I can almost trace that back to a conversation with you.
Well, I'm older, so maybe you did. I mean, because I've had a few more years on you, but yeah, and they're tough things. There's tough life things. I mean, we wanted to have a child so bad, and my wife had multiple miscarriages. And then we get down to the point where she's 9 months pregnant, and we finally decide to decorate that room, and we're pumped and excited, and then find out that the baby died, full term stillborn. Now, if we had had that baby, we probably wouldn't have our adopted daughter, Maggie, who I forget she's adopted, but we wouldn't have had Maggie. So I can't look back and say I'm glad that happened, but at the same time, I see what good happened out of it. And I can't imagine life without that girl. So, if you live life that way, then you realize, hey, you just move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I also can't imagine life without that girl. She is the light in my darkness on many, many days. But I think that's, to your point, I think that's why we have hope in our life. And I think that's why we even have certain people in our life. And I think something that I've talked about a lot on this podcast is how leaders need community. They need other leaders surrounded by them to help them, to steward them, to coach them, because oftentimes exactly who you are to me in a lot of my personal areas of life is that, we need people with more wisdom in our life to help us, because I think especially young leaders, it is sometimes you walk through really dark seasons where it's really difficult to see the hope. And it's, when you're getting turned down for deals and you're not getting job offers and you're getting turned down for promotions, and it just feels like one slam after another. And like, it feels like the hope is diminishing. So as a more seasoned, full of wisdom leader, what would you say to that person that maybe is in that season of just grief and turmoil and feeling like every opportunity is being shut down? How would you tell them to remain hopeful?
So you said something I think it's very important, and it's very hard for me to do it because not really very hard, but my age. I've always admired hanging around people that were older than me to learn from their experience and what they went through. Wisdom, you can't buy that. So I think that's something I think the generation now wants to do everything quick and fast and make a buck and move on. But I think that wisdom is like a source of water that they're just walking right past and they're thirsty. And that's something you should always have somebody, whether it's a family member or a friend that's older and wiser, that can say, hey, before you blow up and think this is the end of the world, because many people have gotten turned down for jobs. And sometimes it was a blessing you got turned down for that job. Um, I know I'm kind of shooting a different story, but this is back earlier in my career. I was looking at a job opportunity, and I'd been out of work for a little while because I had a non-compete. And so I was looking, and um, we had no desire to move to the Northeast, and had a great opportunity for with a company in Philadelphia, which I had no desire to live, and flipped to New York, stayed in a place on, Madison Avenue. At the time, this has been 10 years ago, it was $600 a night room. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. They must really like me. I met with the private equity group, and great meeting, and thrilled about it. And the CEO wanted me on board. And then a week or two later, he said, hey, Larry, he said, we're going in a different direction. And I'm like, no, I was all set to move and do all of that. Again, I found out 4 or 5 months later, whoever was doing the accounting for this large company was doing some things that were illegal. And so the company was sold within about 4 months. After, it was about 6 months after I had my interview. So had I gone with that company, we would have moved from Texas to Pennsylvania. I would have not known anyone. We'd probably owned a house and be stuck. So think about it. I like to do analogies. My wife hates this, but when you're at 50,000 feet and you're a pilot, you can see all around you. You know what's happening. When you're on the ground, you can't see what's happening. So you have to trust in something. And I choose to trust in the Lord that He knows the best path for me. So for me to get upset about something and think, I should have gotten that job, I should have gotten it. You never know. You're being protected possibly from jobs and opportunities and people, quite frankly, that you would have never met had you not taken that job. Had you not taken the job, you would have, you would have never met them. But had you taken it, you would have met them, and they could. I mean, there's also, it's sort of like LinkedIn. We're 1 degree connection or 2 connections from probably the whole planet. And the key is that God organizes these things, and these things happen, and, they're for our good. So just have to shake it off, I mean, this life is so short. Yes, I'm 62. I look in the mirror and I feel like I'm like 30 with 32 years experience, and my daughters remind me that I'm not. But in fact, I look in the mirror and I'm like, who is this old guy? But the life goes by so fast. And, if we truly believe there's an eternity, you're going to live forever, this is a drop in the bucket. And think about it. The people that that have passed on, you'll spend more time with them in another place than you did on earth. So this is short. So I want to fulfill my destiny, though, while I'm here on the earth. To me, that's more important than money or anything else. It's, why was I put here? Am I doing what I was put here for? And if I'm not, I need to get on the fast track and find out what that is. And sometimes it's about money, because I've got to make money to support the kids that I'm taking care of. So that's a part of it. But the big part of it is just showing love and kindness and generating hope and watching these kids just take off and explode. I mean, that's a kick for me.
I think you just shared so much wisdom, but I think one of the things I often reflect on, and ironically, I just posted this on LinkedIn a couple days ago, is that mentorship matters, right? And I think that I will never look anyone in the eye and say like, oh yeah, I'm a young leader. I've been managing teams for about 10 years and I know everything, because that's not true. I mean, that's why I bring experts onto my podcast so that they can hear other perspectives. Is certainly like I research and publish in leadership. So I do know some things and I do manage teams, but I haven't been doing that for 30, 40 years the way other people have. And everyone is so different. And I think that I often see that people that don't understand the value of mentorship maybe have just never experienced a good mentor or never allowed someone to speak into their life. And I think that that is truly a very mature point in a leadership journey that you have to get to, where 1, you recognize you don't know it all, and 2, you actually have to be willing to let other people speak into your life. Because you could have like the best mentor sitting in front of you, but if you aren't willing to listen to them, their wisdom means absolutely nothing. So I think humility is a big part of that as well. So I wanted to ask you a question that this is a little bit off the topic of hopefulness, but I think it's closely tied. Is that something I had talked about with a previous podcast guest is about a lot of times people kind of get thrown into management or leadership roles because of money. You know, they want a promotion, they want to make more money. And so they accept a leadership role where they're going to manage big projects and people, and they really don't know what they're getting themselves into. I am a big proponent that financial stability is actually very important. And that, you know, if you want certain materialistic things in life, or you want to give back at higher levels, or you want to, whatever it might be, I believe that money buys options and choices. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. And I think there's a lot of people that believe money is purely evil. And I think certainly when you give a lot of money to bad people, that's not good. But I think good people can use money for good. And that's something that I remind myself of often, is that as a leader, I want to empower people to make as much money as possible, because if we can put good people in the world, good leaders with lots of money, that leads to a lot of good changes. So how do you think those kind of correlate, this idea of making more money and creating more hope in society?
Yeah, so interesting. And again, I go back to stories because I've got so many. But when I was a manager at Baxter, I had 6 sales reps and 2 nurses that reported into me in about a 6-state area. And I told them, I said, look, I want you guys all to succeed, because if you succeed, I succeed. So yes, I might be your manager or your boss or whatever, but hey, I'm Larry and I want to be here for you. I want to encourage you. Now, not all the managers acted that way. They were, quote, a manager. And they were, so one of the things that really hit me, and I appreciate it. I don't mean to be bragging about me, but we were at a national sales meeting, international sales meeting in Honolulu. And one of these guys from one of the other teams came over to me. He goes, Larry, he goes, oh man, I wish I could be on your team. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, your people look forward to riding with you riding with them. And they have a blast with you. And he said, my guy is just tough and always wants to know what I didn't do and all that. And I said, well, everybody's style is a bit different. But I think, we realize, maybe younger you don't, but as you get older, everybody puts on, pants the same way. I mean, I know 2 weeks ago, I was with a billionaire. And, and I saw him actually helping people get on and off a boat. I mean, so yes, money's important, but, how you react and how you live is important too. And I do think, it says that money can be a root of evil. It's not evil in itself, but when the focus is money, so I can have more, so I can do this and that. But it does. It's like, when I talk to my clients and I tell them, I say, look, I need a lot of money. And they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? I said, I've got a children's home, orphanage in Africa, and I need to make a ton of money because I want to make sure they're taken care of. So I think it's where you put that. But yes, to have high objectives, I think is very important. But it's not always, you don't always make the most money if you're a manager. I mean, I made more money as a account executive than I did a manager, and all I had to focus on was me, and that was plenty to focus on. But that's all I had to, so, but yeah, I think it all boils down again to taking the risk, and risks that are appropriate for where you are in your career. Because you don't want to come back and say, man, I wish I'd taken that manager job. You took it and you're like, I never want to do a manager job again because I don't deal with people well. Well, great. Well, you took the opportunity. What did it take? 6, 8 months, a year, 2 years out of your life? Come on. I mean, that's nothing. Now you don't want to do that, or you do want to do that. You want to focus on that. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's actually really, really unique and wise perspective. And someone had said to me recently, they were like, oh, don't you hate managing people? It's the worst part of a job. And I was like, no, I actually really love supervising people. It's one of my favorite things to do because I love like investing into them and seeing them grow and develop. But I recognize that also takes a ton of time to do it intentionally. And not everyone has that skill set. And so if that's not your skill set, that's okay. Or if you're not even willing to grow in that skill set, that's okay too. Just don't do that thing, right? And I think I love what you said, that it's like, do it for a couple of years. If it doesn't work out, like move on to something else. And I think that people are so scared to try something new. And I often think it's because people don't have hope in their future, as that they're scared that, oh, if I lose this job, like I won't get a better job, or I won't be able to make enough money, or I won't be able to support my family, or whatever it is, because they don't have, honestly, I think, hope in themselves too, is that they like don't think they're good enough to do and get the things they want out of life. What do you think?
I think what it boils down to in general is a fear of failure. When I was a little boy, second grade, I was learning to write in cursive, which they don't ever do now anymore. That's, writing a little bit fancy, but it's in cursive. And I'll never forget, I was standing in my little chair and a chalkboard, and I was just crying. And my mother said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I can't even write my name. How will I ever amount to anything?" And at that moment, that fear hit me. And for years, I mean, until my 40s, I still had that fear of failing. And it was from that root way back when I was 7 or 8 years old. It's okay to fail. Look at all the executives, look at all the people that made all this money. They've all failed. I mean, somebody the other day, I forget who it was. It might have been Musk. Elon Musk said, "Hey, if I fail," he said, "in 2 years, I'll be a millionaire again." It's what's in you, but you've got to take those risks. And if you fail, so what? You fail. Here's the thing I look at too. The people that we're trying to impress and look up to, in 2 to 3 years or less, they'll probably be out of our lives. Or 5 or 6 years, they'll be out of our lives. So we're so concerned about pleasing a certain person who will be in our life for a period of time, but then they're gone. So expend that energy on growth within yourself and not on trying to please somebody who's not going to be around.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I think far too many people are concerned about what other people think of them. And I see this a lot with leaders, especially in corporate America, as they're so concerned about what everyone else around them is doing and thinking and acting and behaving. And I'm like, just focus on you. Just deal with you. Deal with how you treat people, how you love people, how you care for people, and like everything else will work out. And if it doesn't, it's not meant to be. And that's okay too. I mean, much easier to say that than when you're in the moment and super hyper emotional. But it is true.
If you wouldn't take advice from someone, and that person is the same one that's criticizing you, that's ridiculous. So if you won't take advice from them, blow off whatever they say, because it's not going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my mentors always says that if you wouldn't swap places with that person, don't take their advice, because clearly their life isn't something you're interested in. And I think that is so wise, is that I think oftentimes we take advice and perspective from people that like their tree is rotten. They have no apples, everything's withered. And it's like, that's not someone you want to listen to or emulate. So something I wanted to ask you that I feel like kind of weirdly back to that mission trip I took in middle school is like, I think I learned this then, but primarily again was through your family, is this idea of kind of knowing you have hope because other people don't. And I think right now, especially in our society, people are pretty quick to judge to how difficult our world is and how challenging our world is and how everything's falling apart and inflation and everything is bad. Everything is bad all the time, according to everyone. And maybe I'm very naive in this, but like, I really believe it's not that bad, because I think about, my father-in-law lives in Mexico and he does fairly well, but I think about what it's like to live in Mexico and I'm like, well, I have clean drinking water, so I'm doing pretty freaking good. So what do you think, how do you keep that perspective of knowing that you have hope and that others don't, and they don't have the luxuries and privileges we have? How does that keep things in perspective for you?
Well, I think for me at least, and it's easy to say because of where I'm really involved, but if you make it a common practice, a daily practice of giving yourself to other people, not for what you can get out of it, but just because you want to help them. Because I guarantee you, when you help them, and the way you feel inside is far better than any kind of money could bring for the most part. But you do things not because you're going to get something out of it, knowing that you're not going to get anything out of it. And daily, I get usually text messages or emails or phone calls from my African friends, and they tell me, the cow that we were using to plow, we're talking about plowing, died. What am I going to do? And what I'll say is, look, how much is the cow? The cow's $500. Well, I'll pay for half. You get a 50% discount on the cow. $250, big deal. What is that? And they just get so excited, and it gives them hope. The little boy that I started with, his brother started and my wife doesn't even know this, but he started a little, they call it a saloon, but it's a little barbershop in a village. And he was so excited to get started, but he needed some supplies and all that. And I said, look, I'm going to make an investment in you. I'm not going to just give stuff to you, but this I am going to give you. I'm going to make an investment. And so made an investment in him, and he got started. He was excited. And then he calls me crying. He goes, Dad, he said, they're coming and inspecting all the businesses, and we've got to have our permit. And he said, it's $60 US. I'll never get that, because he makes probably about maybe $10 a week or something. And so I said, okay. I said, I don't want to see you fail this soon. You're just getting started. I'll send it over to you. So it's almost like, it's like Cash App. You just send it this right there, or whatever, Zelle. And so then he started, and he called me again crying, and he goes, Dad, there's 2 other ones that just opened up in the village, and I thought I was going to be the only one. I said, you are focused on the wrong thing. You need to focus on what you can do. And I said, I've got an idea, and I'd like to do this. You keep doing what you're doing. You're just opening, but in a couple of weeks, I want you to put a poster up and say, free haircuts for 1 week. And I said, you keep up with how many haircuts that you gave during that week, or excuse me, the month. No, it was a week. It was just for a week. Free haircuts for a week. And I said, and I'll pay for every one of those haircuts. And I said, but what you need to do, though, is you need to take that time and you need to build incredible relationships with your customers. I said, you need to buy suckers. What do you mean? What is suckers for? For the kids. You got to give the kids a sucker. You buy some drinks, soft drinks, give them to the customers, talk to them, get to know them personally and all that. So he did that for a week. And the other businesses were killed because he was doing it all for free for that week. But now since then, they're opting to go with him because they met him. They know he's doing well. And I told him in a couple of weeks, let's do a buy one, get one free, or kids haircuts free next month. Let's do things to kind of shake it up because, quite frankly, the other ones there don't have any conception of this. So anyway, but again, I think a lot of it is your focus, what you're focused on. But having someone that you can bounce things off, and I love that. I started a ministry years ago called Bravehearts, and it was men mentoring sons of single mothers. We really tried to encourage those boys that they could do it, they could make it, and just incredible success stories from those times. But I think mentorship is huge, and I think it's like you're looking at buckets of gold, and you're just walking right past it. And I like to learn from other people's mistakes. That's how I like to learn. And the only way you're going to do that is from talking to other people and to being, as you said, humble, which goes a long way.
Yeah. One of my favorite pastors, he always says that you have to be hot, humble, open, and transparent. And or honest, open, and transparent. And I love that. And I always remind myself of that, is that when I'm asking for people's perspective, for them to help me and coach me and mentor me through leadership challenges, like, am I prepared to be like, actually, am I ready to receive? Right. So I want to ask you the question, because you talk a lot about relationships, and this really tracks that. Again, like, I don't think this is something I like openly knew that you were doing when Maggie and I were growing up, but I saw you had so many like deep rooted relationships. And again, I think there's a lot of mentorship and parenting happening just by modeling the way, right? This is something we talk about a lot in leadership, is that people are watching you when you don't realize they're watching you, and just who you are like usually has this ripple effect. And I'm sure that's probably how a lot of things were for you and I, is there were a lot of things you were doing with your girls that I just I was just around a lot. Like I felt like a third daughter in your household a lot of days because I was just in your home a lot growing up. And I saw that you and Mama Nail have so many relationships, like deep rooted, rich relationships, people that trust you and care about you and really that you invest into, I think most importantly. And I really do view relationships as an investment. Like you said, is that, and relationships take time really more than anything. And I think my time is valuable. And that's why I view it as an investment. But how do you think that correlates to hope? Because I think about specifically your daughter, and not to shout you out, Maggie, but here's your shout out, is that I like when I'm having dark moments, and she's usually my first go-to, and she's usually the first person to be like, you got this. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, things are going to get better. Like, I know this sucks and it hurts and it's painful and all those emotions are so valid, but like, it's going to be better. And she reminds me a lot of days, like, there's hope, and that I don't need to like stay stuck in the stagnancy and the chaos and the challenges, and that I can just pick myself up, dust myself off, and walk forward. So how do you think those relationships kind of become critical to you in remaining in that hopeful spirit when you're navigating challenges?
Well, again, I think it's important. You got to invest in people, and um, you got to be open and transparent. You have to be vulnerable. Is the what I'm trying to say. You got to be vulnerable. In life, the richness of life is your relationships. You can have a huge home and not have any children, not have a wife, not have anything, and you have a lot of money, but that doesn't provide hope or happiness. Um, so I think the richness in life is found in other people and relationships with other people and helping other people and encouraging other people. Listen, we all need encouragement. I don't care who you are. You need encouragement, and you need people that are solid. I talked to a gentleman just about 2 hours ago who was wrongly, you think I deal with criminals, but he was a doctor, and his wife was a sales rep, and they thought he was funneling business through the sales rep anyway, which he wasn't. He was just doing regular business. But the DOJ got involved, and they wanted to win. They wanted to win because they had been looking after him for a couple of years. Anyway, he lost his medical license for 2 years, but then he was hired right back by the group, which is a prominent orthopedic group in a major city. And so I invited him, or he went to this conference I went to in Nashville. And then today we were talking. He said, "There's something about me I don't think you know." And I said, "Okay, tell me." And he goes through all this, and he finishes. And I said, "I knew all that." I said, "I looked you up." He said, "Well, I was concerned that you wouldn't want to introduce me. It might hurt your reputation." I said, "I knew all of that." He said, "Well, I really didn't do anything." And this, that. I said, "Look, you don't have to keep apologizing. I know that. And I wouldn't be hanging around with you if I felt you were, going to be a stain on me. We all need each other. We all make mistakes. I mean, it's easy to judge somebody else, but we all make mistakes. We all fall. And, we got to have grace and encouragement. But to be alone, I mean, I'm not shocked by the suicide rate, because if people are alone, they're not reaching out to anybody. Their mind starts to spin and all these things, and they go from something that's not a huge deal to something that's, life ending, because they're thinking it in their mind. And again, not to get spiritual, but the enemy loves that. He wants to see us fail. So where do we get our help? Yes, we can talk to the Lord, but we can talk to other people and say, "Look, I'm going through a tough time." And somebody will say, "Jenna, you know what? I went through that last year, and here's what I did. And you know what? I've forgotten about most of the things that have happened."
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe the phrase that everyone says, that you are the five closest people you associate with. And I am so extra cautious of who I associate with for that reason, because I know, I've had seasons of my life where I've been associated with people who are negative and depressed, and things are awful and they feel like the world is falling apart, and I automatically start feeling that way, versus when I have people in my life that I know are more optimistic and hopeful and believe in the good of the future, then I'm like, "Oh, like, it's not that bad. It's going to be okay." And I think that people often underestimate the power that other people bring into their life. So I have a couple more questions for you, but one of this is more of a situational. So we'll see how this goes. But I often hear from leaders that, they might be trying really hard, right? Like they're trying to be hopeful. They're trying to be positive. They're trying to see the good. But then they have folks on their team or people they work with that are just cranky, for lack of a better word, and cynical and negative, and they just are not getting on board with the positive train. And what would you say to those people? Because I think that I agree with what you said earlier, is that we can only control our actions and our attitudes, of course, but it is really difficult when we're showing up as leaders, trying our best, and then we have these people around us that are just not as awesome. We don't really have control over them because we work with them. Sometimes they work for us and maybe we can't terminate them. I don't know. There could be a lot of reasons, right? So what do you do in situations like that?
You're fired. Straighten up. You're not in Afghanistan. You're going to be okay. No, I think if they're going to be around, they're going to be part of your team. I think you got to invest in them, even if you don't want to. You go to Starbucks, you buy their lunch, you buy their dinner, you do something for them that's totally unexpected. There's a book that's written about Nordstrom where they go the extra mile. They do things that people aren't even expecting, like giving them a glass of champagne when they're trying on shoes or something. So you do something like that. And you say, look, I want to get to know you because I want to have a great working relationship. What can I do to help your situation to make, you enjoy your job more? Wow. I think that'll get them on the Jenna train. She cares about me, but you got to do it genuinely and then continue to and say, hey, what happened the other day? We got this relationship now. What happened? You were being so negative. And they might say, look, my dad's dying or, blah, blah, blah. And you say, okay, I get it. But you invest in them again, like we're talking about, giving them hope. You never know what somebody's going through.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? I remind myself of that pretty much every single day, is that when anything bad happens in my life and it's associated with another human being, I'm like, you don't know. Maybe something really bad is going on. Maybe they're emotional because of X, Y, Z. Maybe they're just taking it out on you, which I think is more often than not the case, which
Yes.
this is weird, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I've started to actually see that as a good thing. When people take out their negative emotions on me, I'm like, that's because they know I'm a safe place. Like, that's because they know that if they're going to come at me and be upset and angry and yelling, it's because they know that, like, I can take it. I'll be okay. Like, I'm an emotional, safe place for them. And that, we will have those conversations afterwards about like, hey, are you okay? What's going on here? But also that, like, I'd much rather them do that to me than the CEO. Like, I'd much rather have those conversations in a safer, confined office than places that could get us into some real challenging situations.
But I think people like that do that to you or with you or about you, I think they know that they can trust you. And so those are the people, if they know they can trust you, those are the people that I would invest time in. Because if they are already at a level of trust in you, you just need to get to know them a little bit better and guide them. And then when they win, you win. And that is the kind of stuff that is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Not easy, but fulfilling.
Well, I say this often on the podcast, but I don't think anything in leadership is easy. I think you're actually asking for like the hardest road possible. Like, you're asking to climb up a mountain with like a 50-pound pack on your back. But it's so worthwhile, because when you honestly, you get to the top of the mountain a lot, which is great. But then there's another mountain. But you get to take other people with you, which I think is the best part of the job, the role, is that you get to take others.
You just have to put everything in life in perspective.
What a beautiful sentiment, indeed. So, speaking of perspective, so I end all of my podcast episodes with what I think is probably one of the most deep-rooted emotions for most people, which is fear. So, if you didn't have any fear or anxiety or anything like that in your life, in your mind, what would you be doing and why?
Wow, that's a tough one.
That's why I save it for last.
But yeah, because I feel like, not to be arrogant, but I feel like I'm doing it now because I never dreamed of Africa, of doing something over there. I met this little boy, like I said, when he was 6, or started talking to him. I flew to Africa and met him when he was 20, getting ready to be 21. I met people up there that wanted to have a guy who was an orphan, and he wanted to have a children's home, a school, a church, a hospital. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. We're working in that direction. We already rescued 50 kids. We bought 20 acres of land. We're building this year a children's home, eventually a school, a church, and a medical center. And we're going to do that in other rural areas around Uganda. So, there's probably more I could do. I mean, I could probably live over there for 6 months out of the year, but I need to make the provision for the vision. So I need to work and make money so I can give them, not that other people don't, but I need to do that. And so for me personally, I feel like I'm living my best life. And it's not because of my financial success. It's because of the impact that I'm being allowed or privileged to have. Because here's the thing. If I didn't say yes to this guy and decide to help him and do this, somebody else would have done that eventually. But I miss out on all the blessing and all the excitement and watching these kids, some of which were near death that we've rescued, and now they're in school and doing well. A little girl that was completely lame and walking around with flip-flops between her two fingers because she was dragging herself on the ground. And we raised money, and she's had multiple surgeries, and she is on crutches now after about 1.5 years, and she's soon to be walking again. 8-year-old girl, her whole life is going to change. I mean, I got story after story after this. Is that important, or is that deal important? No. That is important. That is not. So it's getting your priorities straight and all. So probably, this would be hard to do with my grandchildren, my wife, and the kids and all that, but I probably spend more time in Africa, and I may be doing that anyway, but spend months at a time versus weeks at a time. And I love helping people. I love connecting with people. I love providing hope, because I think that's number one.
Well, thank you for providing hope to so many of us, myself included. I certainly think that I owe a lot of my success in life to you. And I truly believe that it takes a village to raise people, children. And you were a big part of my village. So, and I know my dad would echo that as well. So thank you for being a big part of my life. Thank you for being on the podcast today. And ultimately, thank you for giving hope.
Well, I appreciate that more than you know, but Jenna Heath, it's not really Jenna Heath, but Jenna, I know you by Jenna Heath. She's married now. You've made some absolutely great decisions. And it's interesting in life, the more good choices and bad choices you make, you end up in a place where you want to be. And just the opposite, if you make more bad choices than good, you end up in a place you don't want to be. So yes, I've had influence on you, but you've had to make the decisions and the choices, and now you're in a place that is good, and you're growing, and you'll do just fine.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate you more than you know. And I look forward to hearing more about your trips to Uganda and all the great work you're doing there.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on Tearing Up My Heart Emotional Leadership Lessons podcast. I hope you learned so much and are ready to tear up old notions and get started on your leadership journey. Make sure to follow us at jheathmoreno, and I hope you'll join us next time.